Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, now we are switching gears to what's been going on in agriculture, specifically what's been going on with our bees. And in case you don't understand or know the importance of bees, bees are the reason why we still have crops. Bees are the reason why we can have a harvest every time we plant something in the ground. Without bees, well, our agriculture will be in a very sad space. But there's an issue happening within the bee community right now. And we just want to, of course, highlight it and discuss it a little bit. So to have those discussions with me, I'm being joined by Mr. Kerron James, the president of the Tobago Apicultural Society. Good morning and welcome to you.
Good morning, viewers. Good morning, all. Thank you for inviting us here today to share with you these updates as to it regards to the amendments to the Beekeeping Act.
All right. So now let's start exactly there. There's a new legislation going into Parliament, but when is it going to be part of the parliamentary order? All of those things.
Right. So excellent. It has been carried for debate. However, because of the constitutional reform with regards to the commissioner and the acting commissioner, that debate, it has been postponed or delayed until that has been completed. Yeah, so it was tabled for last week Friday, and however, it has not been scheduled to be discussed again quite yet.
Okay. Yeah? Now, I know one of the major challenges with that legislation is the stipulation that to have an apiary, you must be at least 100 feet. Is it 100 meters yeah, from a residential property on the roadside? And how is that going to affect the way that you guys operate, especially here in Tobago?
Right. I'm glad that you brought that point. But however, what is being proposed is 200 meters.
200 meters, yes.
Right.
So it's currently at 100 meters, and then it's going to be 200 meters in this legislation. Right,
but it's not only 200 meters. There's also an additional 50 meters from your boundary. So let's say, for example, you have a lot of land to operate on, right? You have to have 50 meters from that boundary of that lot of land, and then 200 meters from that 50 meters, right? You have to have the closest business place, house, farm, rabbitry, anything like that must not come within that range, right? So that now puts a strain on land space now for us to operate with already Trinidad and Tobago's existing land tenure issues, right? And government not being able to give out, right, lands for operation with agriculture. That now further puts the beekeeping industry or the beekeeper under strain to operate. And then now, if that is the stipulation, by that regard, you will have to now have a minimum, using one lot of land, a minimum of 11.56 acres of land to operate safely, right? No, that is our stretch. How are we going to acquire that? Does the government intend to give each and every beekeeper, let's say, 12 acres of land to operate? Yeah? So that is a feat that we need to have addressed. So, we can work around. It's not to say that we are not concerned about the safety of the passerby, our neighbors, or persons who may be in the vicinity, right? Because you have hunters, it have various people that will come around, right? It's not to say that we are not aware or don't concern about their safety, but we want to have a better measure that they can exist and we can exist cohesively, yeah?
And of course, because, as I mentioned, bees are extremely important to the health of our agriculture sector. Without bees, we do not have an agriculture sector.
Exactly, for the biodiversity. Not only that, it also provides a means for persons to occupy themselves constructively and add to the, what we like to say, the GDP, right, of the country, to serve, to provide food, to help in the sustainability of food, right? And to occupy individuals, whether it be younger, older, anyone, right? In a productive way, a constructive way, and to make revenue to help support their families and that kind of thing. Now, with these restrictions, well, I wouldn't say restrictions, but with these amendments that they are proposing, right? It will now put the beekeeping community under strain, and we don't want to strain the ability of us producing. We want to enhance, we want to encourage, yeah? I think that's the idea that we want to put forward to the government and the ministry in order to have this thing properly well done. Go
now,
ahead.
before I get into, because there are some other concerns in that legislation, but I want to get from you too, how many beekeepers in Tobago would be immediately affected if the government decides to say, okay, you can't have a apiary more than 200 meters away from the roadway and residential areas and all that stipulations? How many of them would be affected, or what percentage?
To be honest with you, none. Right? The reason for that is because the act or the proposed act stipulates Africanized bees. However, Tobago does not have Africanized bees. We are famous or known for having European and Italian bees. So that is there is a little bit difference there in dealing with Tobago. And also we have the THA Act, which governs agriculture in Tobago. So even though we have the THA Act has to also be guided by the laws of the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, right? So that is the issue there when it comes to the Tobago beekeepers. But we don't want to just do a broad brush and say, right, and forget about the Trinidadians, because they are affected and they produce as well. So it will affect the production of the nation holistically and not just Tobago or just Trinidad. Yeah?
There's another concern in the legislation, and that is the ability to import honey, and the fact that you might only, suppliers or whatever the case may be, can just buy a license for $100. How will that now affect the local beekeeping community, especially those honey producers?
Yeah, that's going to affect us in a lot of ways, because not only are they proposing $100 for import permit, they are also proposing that we pay $600 to register our apiary, right? And $600 to re-register our apiaries every 3 years, right? Now, mind you, the re-registration of your apiary is an excellent idea. It helps alleviate persons using apiary numbers that persons are no longer in the business or have died and passed away, yeah? So that's an excellent idea. But however, why are we being punished? Or why are we being caused to pay a fee now to produce food for our nation, to serve our country? Yeah? And do we want to have discouraging measures for interesting persons? So if a person now sit down and say, well, boy, I want to get into agriculture, let me check out this bee thing. And then they realize, well, boy, rather pay $600 to register, rather pay $600 to re-register every 3 years, and then it also have the possibility of us being fined $100,000. That will be a deterrent, right? And we don't want to deter persons from seeking the interest to help increase the sector, right? So that is a problem there that we want to have help discuss with the government or the ministry to address. Yeah, and with regards to the $100 for the import permit, why we are forced to pay $600, they are only allowed to pay $100, making it easier, and they're not doing any work. They're not doing any heavy lifting. They're not to supply bees, boxes. They're not to go in the apiary, manage. They're just going and get a permit, bam, import, bam, and then come and produce and then sell, right?
And of course, then they could sell it because their cost is less. They could sell it less, and then the actual national beekeepers, they're the ones that lose out.
Exactly, and then you're forcing the national beekeepers to increase their price because their cost of operation has increased, right? And we don't want to come out here and be selling persons a bottle of honey at 750 ml at $400 and $500. That's unreasonable. We want the government to work with us to help us decrease the price so that the average Joe, anyone can afford to have a bottle of honey in their homes.
Now, give me an idea, because I'm a little bit unclear on this whole import allowance, because as far as I know, that we were not supposed to allow for the importation of honey. So what was the change there? Why such a change in now allowing people to import honey instead of just empowering the beekeeping community?
Right. The changes on let's say it has become necessary now because of the constraints of CARICOM agreements, right? So now we have to think about trade, free trade, the freedom of trading between islands and that kind of thing, right? So yes, that has to happen. We don't want to stand in the way of progress. We don't want to obstruct constructive change. But what we are saying is put measures in place that can secure our interests, our very valued and treasured industry, yeah, and also seek the interests of those who wish to import, right? So that is the reason for them doing this amendment, to encourage or to facilitate the importation of honey, right?
And then what about the export of honey? Now, does the act, the legislation cover provisions to allow you guys to export if you want?
Yes, it does. And they did not address those that particular part where it comes to us exporting. They left that part untouched, right? So yes, we can export. There are some stipulations to be fulfilled, but likewise, we find that it should have some stipulations to fulfill in order to import and still secure the interests of the industry and the nation at heart.
Now, did you have any sort of consultation with the government and the Ministry of Agriculture before this bill came to Parliament?
Yes, there were various consultations. There was a consultation held in Trinidad, and there was one held in Tobago at the Magdalena Grant. Yes, so, and we are saddened to see that it seems that not much of what we discussed in those consultations were taken into consideration. Some of it was, some of it were neglected, and then others were left a little too vague. So we want to strengthen it. We want to make good law, because we're thinking not only about today, we're thinking about tomorrow as well. Yeah?
And we're going to get into some of those recommendations and so on when we come back after the break. But viewers, we got to go for a break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this. And welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, we are continuing our discussions on bees, specifically a new legislation that is going to Parliament to regulate the industry and to impose some changes into the beekeeping industry itself. And of course, it is affecting the way that they are able to function and that sort of thing. And before we went to the break, we were speaking about, and of course I'm speaking this morning with Mr. Kerron, the president of the Tobago Apicultural Society, and we were speaking about some of the recommendations that they made to the Ministry of Agriculture regarding how we should go ahead in terms of opening up the market to allow the importation of honey. And so, Mr. James, so give us an idea about those recommendations that you made, because as it is right now, all that someone needs to do is apply for an import permit and just pay $100 fee, and they can bring in honey.
Well, right now they can't, right? But
yes.
The proposal
would allow them to.
Right, along with having a certificate of health for those imported items, right? Now, the reason why we are holding back or refraining, if that's the right word I want to use, or reservations then, right? Our reservations about importation is specifically geared towards disease infestation, right? Because disease infestation in an outbreak in Trinidad and Tobago can possibly wipe out the entire industry, especially due to the measure that has to be taken with regards to the response then, with regards to an outbreak. You have to destroy your hives, and not just destroy the bees, but also destroy hive parts, destroy equipment, have them burnt, incinerated, in order to prevent this disease from being spread. And an example of one of those diseases are American foul brood, right? So we want to prevent this possibility, or we want to restrict this possibility of an outbreak of diseases as best as possible, right? So we want to encourage the government to think about testing, right? And not only having the persons who wish to export to us to test, but also we should be equipped to test, to verify and to authenticate what is being said, right? What is being sent, right? And also to prevent now us being on the back foot should something happen, right? If there's an outbreak of a disease, we don't want to have to now send the samples to another country to be tested, to be verified. That is a long wait now. While we're waiting, what is going on? Because we haven't verified whether or not the hive has been infested, yes or no, right? So we send it to test to verify. That time that we're waiting for it to be verified, take care it really has an outbreak.
And the disease could spread more.
Right. And then by that time, half the industry gone down. So this is what we are clamoring for. Have the facilities, have the ability for us to test and not only test for the diseases, but also be able to test to verify the species of bees. Because I could come into Trinidad, open up an apiary, use our European bees from Tobago, and then they can stipulate, put pressure on me or apply pressure on me to say, well, I have to use the 200 meters parameter. I don't have Africanized bees. Even though I'm operating an apiary in Trinidad, I'm operating the apiary with European bees. How are they going to verify now whether my bees are European or Africanized at that point in time, before they could say charge me or fine me, right?
Excuse me, and all of these are missing from the legislation, all of these parameters.
Yes, right? So that is what we want to highlight to them, right? So these shortfalls that we can identify, we can highlight to you all, we make the necessary recommendations, adjustments, and then go forward with good law. Yeah?
And what are some of the other concerns that you have with the legislation at this point in time?
They only focus mainly on the exportation and the importation, right? That is transshipment and importing honey. But what about the concerns that already was affecting us, the beekeepers? Like, for example, the inspector of apiaries, right? With all the duties and responsibilities carded for that individual. He needs resources, right? Not only physical resources, but also human resources, because he cannot be in two places at once, especially given that we are a twin island state. He can be in Trinidad and in Tobago at the same time. Even though we have an apiaries officer here in Tobago, right, who performs some of those responsibilities on his behalf, we also need other persons now, because now he has to be at the port to verify that this honey coming in and it doesn't spill, so that bees can go on it, right? Or how to say, take up that nectar and become infected, right? So he has to be on the port. He still has to perform the duties of inspecting apiaries. He still has to perform the duties of giving registration certificates. He has a lot on his table, so he needs support, right? And we think that they overlooked that factor. Nice. Also, other things like the amendments, not only the amendments, but the act itself does not address pollen in any way. So pollen is not a big thing now. Well, what if from now, 5 years down the road, pollen becomes a big thing? Are we just going to allow pollen to come in the country?
And explain, I mean, for those viewers who may not know, explain the importance of pollen and just the complications with it as well.
Right. Now, pollen is that substance that provides the bees protein. And it also is a major part of pollination, right?
And it's also a product that can come from the bees that is edible and so on. That's
correct. And it's a great source of protein for us humans as well, because bodybuilders also use it, and health-conscious persons use that in their smoothies and that kind of thing, right? So it's not to say that it can just go to the side, and then pollen now can transmit these pathogens or these parts that could carry the disease. So we have to guard against that as well. Yeah?
All right. So, I mean, of course, I mean, have you reached out again? I mean, as this legislation, well, I guess perhaps it's a good thing that this legislation was put on pause in Parliament. So have you been able to reach out to the Ministry of Agriculture to let them know these concerns again?
Yes, we have been making attempts. We have been making progress also with these attempts to reach out to the ministry. They seem to us to be very willing to hear us, and we are enthusiastic, right? We are eager to share, right? So that we can have a good way going forward for the future of Trinidad and Tobago and this beekeeping industry and agriculture on the whole.
All right. Well, in the next few minutes that we have left on the program, I just want to get into just even some of the challenges that the beekeepers, specifically in Tobago, face.
Besides the land tenure to operate, the ability to acquire equipment. And that is also another part of the legislation that they are proposed to amend. Where now we have to write to the Chief Technical Officer of Agriculture in Trinidad to make permission, to have a permit issued to us to import equipment, whether it be bee foundation, whether it be hive parts, tools, and because also in the legislation we are not allowed to bring in second-hand equipment. It must be never used because second-hand equipment also pose the same threat of disease infestation, right? So we need to address the way or ease of us being able to bring equipment, right? We also need to have more partnership, more cohesive working together so that we can make it easier to produce this golden delicacy that we all call honey, yeah?
Yes.
And make it more reasonable for the consumer and the customers to enjoy. So,
and I know that you guys also have done quite a lot of work in Tobago over, let's say, the last 10, 12 years in terms of, you know, strengthening the beekeeping community and so on. How has that been going?
Good so far. We endeavor to do more. We want to raise more awareness with the members of public. We don't only want to raise awareness, but we also want to pique interest of individuals so that they can see how sustainable and how feasible beekeeping is, and it can be a livelihood to support families.
And I mean, also, it's also not as complicated as people make it seem, or as dangerous either, because, you know, there's a lot of knowledge now in terms of how to deal with the bees, so that, you know, for somebody who is worried about getting stung by the bees, you don't usually get stung.
Yes, true. Excellent, because that's the same thing. We want to mitigate the risk, because in anything here is always risk, but we want to mitigate the risks as much as possible so that it can be safely done. Yeah, and that's the same idea that we want to give to the ministry. Yeah.
And then what can you tell me even just about how the bees, the growth of the beekeeping community in Tobago has contributed to the yield or the successful yield of the agriculture sector?
No, because of how the beekeeping industry, it's seasonal and it fluctuates. So sometimes one year we'll be on a high, and next time we'll be on a medium, next time we'll be on a low. But there is sustainability or room for improvement of sustainability of that growth to supply the demand that is out there. Yeah.
And what's the differences between the African bees that Trinidad has and the European bees that Tobago has?
Right. The major difference is their level of aggression, right? How defensive they can become and the distance they can go to be that defensive. That's the major difference between the Africanized bees and the European bees. The European bees are more docile, more calm. Sometimes we like to call them butterflies.
And I mean, in terms of the taste of the honey?
Right. Now, the taste of the honey is going to be mainly distinguished by the flowers that are foraged. Yeah? And different areas will have different foraging patterns and different results then. So sometimes you will see that the honey has different colors, amber, white. Yeah, and then you'll be like, but that doesn't look like honey. That, yeah, because of the flowers that the bees go and get their nectar from, that will determine the quality or the taste thereof, that their honey. And that is also a benefit, a boost, because we can boast of the most variety. Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, the beekeeping community in Tobago is quite a very vibrant group, and you guys, I know the guys have been continuously trying to reach out to the different community and to encourage, especially young people, into beekeeping, because it is, like you said, it's very sustainable industry and something that's so important to the agriculture sector, because without bees, you can't have food.
Yeah. And we also would like to reach out to our counterparts, our partners who are in Trinidad, those who are interested stakeholders right here in Tobago, yeah, and get everybody's input, yeah, because even though we might find there are flaws here, there might be others that we may miss. So we don't want to go with too much missing. We want to go with as much and to address the concerns that we had before, yeah. So we don't just want to address this one thing. We want to address it holistically. So, and with a good change that will go forward, project us forward. Yeah.
Certainly. And so how can people get connected with the Tobago Apicultural Society? We
have our email and we have our contact number, which is 607-4TAS, and our email address is tobagoapiculturalsociety@gmail.com. So those are the means of contacting us if you so desire.
All right, great. I want to thank you so much, Mr. James, for sticking with me for the past half hour to speak about just the beekeeping industry in general, and hopefully we can, make this new legislation better and the one that really supports the local industry, because of course that is so, so important.
Yes, that is indeed the cry, and we would like to thank you for this opportunity. We'd like to thank you, our viewers, for your support. We are happy, right, for that wonderful support to have this change go forward. Yes?
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And viewers, well, we got to end the show this morning right here, but I want to thank you so much for joining us and for viewing. I hope you have a safe and wonderful day, and we'll see you again tomorrow. So bye for now.
It's a brand new morning, rise up to a brand new dawning. As the passion start to rise, the energy fill the skies. I say thanks for favor to wake up and hear